midnight watch at St. Augustine Hospital. As a night owl, it's sometimes difficult to find an overnight job. That's why I took the job at St. Augustine Hospital. The place had been abandoned for years, left to decay since the state decided it was more cost-effective to build a new facility than to refurbish the old one. It was the perfect gig for me. Quiet, solitary, and paid well. I needed the money, so I jumped at the chance. My first night was uneventful. I made my rounds, flashlight cutting through the darkness, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the peeling walls. There was an eerie silence, but I chalked it up to the emptiness of the place. No big deal. The second night, however, was different. I arrived at my post just before midnight, the same as before. The security office was in the old administrative wing, a tiny room with dusty windows and a decrepit desk. I set up my thermos of coffee and settled in for what I expected to be another quiet night. Around 1 a.m., I started my first round. As I walked down the dimly lit corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was silly, I told myself. Just nerves. But the feeling persisted, prickling the back of my neck. The first strange thing I noticed was the sound. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails drumming on a tabletop. I stopped and listened, straining to locate the source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Shaking my head, I continued my patrol. The old hospital had a reputation. Stories of patients who died in agony, of doctors who performed unspeakable experiments, of nurses who vanished without a trace. The locals swore the place was haunted, but I was a skeptic. Ghosts are for kids in horror movies. At least that's what I used to believe. When I reached the old surgical wing, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My breath misted in the air, and I shivered despite my heavy jacket. I heard it again, that tapping sound, louder this time. I swept my flashlight over the walls, the broken windows, the rusty gurneys. Nothing. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard a low, guttural moan. It seemed to come from one of the operating rooms. My heart hammered in my chest as I approached the door. It was ajar, creaking on its hinges. I pushed it open with the toe of my boot and stepped inside. The room was a mess. Broken equipment, shattered glass, and what looked like dry bloodstains on the floor. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I could swear I saw a figure out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there was nothing there. Just my imagination, I told myself. As I turned to leave, something cold brushed against my arm. I jumped back, my flashlight clattering against the floor. In the dim glow, I saw the outline of a handprint on my sleeve, but there was no one there. I grabbed my flashlight and bolted back to the security office, heart racing. Back in the safety of the office, I tried to calm down. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to think. Maybe it was just nerves. maybe I was letting the stories get to me. I forced myself to finish my shift, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next night, I almost didn't go back, but I needed the job. So I steeled myself and returned. The security office felt even smaller, the shadows darker. I told myself it was just my imagination, that there was nothing to be afraid of. But the dread gnawed at me. At 2 a.m., I heard the tapping again. This time, it was closer, more insistent. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound, my pulse quickening with each step. It led me to an old psychiatric ward, a place even the previous security guard seemed to avoid, according to the drawings on the map that was left for me. The door to one of the isolation rooms was ajar, the tapping louder now. I pushed the door open and shone my light inside. The room was empty, just a bare cot and a metal chair. But the tapping continued, coming from the walls themselves. I approached cautiously, reaching out to touch the cold, damp surface. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I whirled around, my flashlight flickering wildly. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as the tapping grew louder, more frantic. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. That's when I heard a whisper, barely audible. "Help me." It was a child's voice, trembling and scared. I backed away from the wall, my flashlight beam shaking. The voice came again, more insistent. "Help me, please." I had to get out of there. I threw my weight against the door, but it wouldn't move an inch. The tapping turned into pounding, the whispering into desperate cries. "Help me, they're coming." Finally, the door gave way, and I stumbled into the hallway. I didn't look back. I ran, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridors, the cries still ringing in my ears. I didn't stop until I was back in the security office, the door locked behind me. That was my last night at St. Augustine Hospital. I quit the next day, leaving my badge and keys on the desk. I didn't even bother to collect my last paycheck. I no longer cared that I needed the money. I just needed to get as far away from that place as soon as possible. I never told anyone what happened. I mean, who would believe me? A grown adult scared by whispers and shadows? I would just be laughed at. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that tapping, that desperate voice begging for help. I tell myself it's just my imagination, that there are no such things as ghosts. But deep down, I know the truth. Ghosts are real, and I know this because St. Augustine Hospital is most certainly haunted. And some things, once they latch onto you, never let you go. Thank you for joining me for another 10-minute Tales. I hope you enjoyed my creepypasta type story. If you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments down below. The story will also be posted over on my subreddit, r/NightmareKrys. Link is in the description down below as well. As always, please like and subscribe. New videos will be posted every Friday. And thanks so much for joining. See you next time.